We are Pro Cannabis Media.
Well, another week and another weed and another good show on In the Weeds with Jimmy Young. I got to tell you about this guy, Rabbi Yaakov Cohen. He heads up an international kosher food company out of Houston, Texas, and he's pro-cannabis. So he'll bless your THC edibles, your CBD edibles, your tinctures, and your vegan foods. That's on In the Weeds with Jimmy Young. But I think I maybe missed another weed, though. You gotta go deep. You gotta go deep. There we go.
Hi, everyone. Welcome again to another edition of In the Weeds with Jimmy Young, a very special podcast that's available on all the big podcast aggregators and podcast distribution networks. We are very honored to have with us today a very special guest. His name is Rabbi Yaakov Cohen. He comes from Houston, Texas now, but he actually grew up in California. Rabbi Yaakov Cohen, thank you so much for joining us on In the Weeds today.
Wonderful. Excited to be here.
You, sir, are quite the story. First of all, let's start with the fact that you run a company or involved with a company called Whole Kosher Services, correct?
Correct.
Explain to our non-enlightened audience what exactly you do as a rabbi in the kosher world.
Great. Okay. So a lot of people do think that, a food product, when it becomes kosher certified, means basically you'll bring in the rabbi and he will give a blessing. Okay. Right. It's blessed by the rabbi, right?
Right.
Nothing could be farther from the truth, even though it is blessed, but there are very specific laws as dictated in the 5 books of Moses, the Old Testament, in terms of what a person can eat, what is kosher and what is not kosher. Kosher literally means proper or fit, meaning fit for consumption, only what is consumed in the mouth. Okay? Mm-hmm. So there are many, almost close to maybe 2,000 nowadays, kosher certification agencies worldwide, okay? And basically what we do is we will check on a product. Let's say that the manufacturer wants to have a kosher certification. So basically what we do is we review basically 2 things goes into kosher certification. One is we have to make sure all of the raw materials come from a kosher source, okay? So that basically, as we said, what is dictated in the 5 books of Moses, there are many types of foods items, right? You'll have meat, right? Meat item, like let's say an animal. What are this is your Bible test for today.
Uh-oh.
Are 2 signs, it says, in the Bible that makes a kosher animal. You need 2 signs, right? A lot of people know this. Some people don't. Some people did their Google research last night. Some people don't. I go into a lot of meetings where there was a guy, he's up on it. Yeah.
Okay.
Play the 2 signs, split hooves and chew cud. Okay. It has to have both, not just one. A camel chews its cud, but does not have split hooves in its feet. So it's not kosher. A pig has split hooves, but it does not chew its cud. It is not kosher. Mentioned one time in the Bible not to eat pork. Okay? Mm-hmm. So basically, it limits us basically to cow, sheep, goat, deer, giraffe, if you could figure out where to slaughter a giraffe. Not that you want to do that, but in any case, we're limited in terms of the type of animal that we could eat. And then even after that, there are many detailed laws in terms of how do you do the ritual slaughter. You have to have a knife. It has to be razor sharp. You go over it with your nail to make sure there's no nick in it. If there's the slightest nick and you slaughtered the animal, it's still called disqualified, right? So you have to have no nicks in the knife. It has to be in the neck because it has to drain the blood the fastest. Because believe it or not, the Torah says that the life force of an animal is in the blood. So if you were to drain the blood the fastest, that would be the fastest way to killing an animal, to drain the life force the fastest way, not a bullet in the head or an air gun or whatever other people use, okay? And even after you do it right, then you still have to inspect inside the internal organs for any disease, any signs of disease. A lot goes into meat. Okay, so it's a very, very sensitive item, meat. That's just one item. Then you'll have your dairy. And, of course, we don't mix.
No mix.
We're not even allowed to own it. It mentions 3 times in the Bible not to mix meat and milk. We're not allowed to put the cheese, even for someone else, even for a Gentile. I'm not allowed to put the cheese on the burger for someone else. Not allowed. Okay? Very strict. No cheeseburgers. People are shocked when they hear that. They go, I'm out of here. I'm out of here, Rabbi. I was going to be kosher. I'm out of here. Okay. And then you'll have a fish. Fish needs 2 signs. Are you aware of this, Jimmy?
No. Look, my favorite food is not kosher. Okay.
I'm the not kosher eater.
Okay. All right. I mean, I never was in it. I've been in kosher homes. My house was never kosher. I was raised conservative in the greater Boston area. So I was certainly exposed to it.
I was raised Reform in Los Angeles, California. I had no clue. No clue.
Wow.
Okay. We had bacon in our house and et cetera, et cetera. There was no, after my bar mitzvah, zip. It was nothing. Okay. Until I got to Jerusalem and then I understood. Okay. So yeah. In any case, so let's say fish. Fish needs 2 signs. It has to have fins and scales. If it doesn't have fins and scales, it is not a kosher fish, so therefore you're eliminated all your lobster, your crab, your shrimp, your crawfish, your catfish, shark cartilage, any derivative of these also, by the way. Any derivative of these, and the biggest derivative that's predominant, especially in the cannabis world now that people are making gummies, is the gelatin. And gelatin is from melted cow bones or melted pig bone.
Now, I've got it. I will admit, okay, I am not surrounded by vegans, but I'm extremely, I'm around 2 of them in particular. And vegan gummies have certainly been put out there on the medicinal dispensary menus. And so it does kind of lend itself. I had to learn, because I love Jell-O, I'll admit it. Okay, my mother used to make Jell-O molds. I loved it.
Kosher Jell-O. Okay.
Right, of course, right. Well, now I understand you can actually find it, and listening to a podcast you did, I think with Lance Craig, was the thing that enlightened me. I was like, oh, you can find vegan gelatin.
Absolutely, there is sources for that. Even came from cows. That's a complicated matter. It can be done. All I know is it can be done, and it can be kosher.
Okay.
Because it's completely changed its original form. It's a completely different substance, and there's criteria for that. In any case,
I get it.
That's fish.
I get it.
Any derivative of fish or any derivative of cows or a mixture of meat and dairy.
Right.
And then there's, of course, what we'll have by bugs. We're not allowed to eat bugs.
I try to avoid bugs
as much as
possible. But sometimes, mostly nowadays, our issues with bugs is besides the fact that they used to make the red dye from M&Ms from beetle blood. Would you believe?
How did you know that? Where did you learn that?
That's known, baby. I'm field, okay? That's
Okay. I got you.
Carmine is one of those. You still find it. Okay, the coloring, and it comes from beetle blood. Okay, they still make it these days. Okay, they make it now synthetic, and that's when believe me, after I was in yeshiva in Jerusalem, and I knew that the M&Ms were not kosher, and then they came out with a synthetic dye for the red. It was kosher. I was so happy that day. I definitely rejoiced. And so that's bugs, but mostly bugs are predominant actually in green leafy vegetables. Okay. So it's like your romaine lettuce, your spinach, your kale, strawberries have a very high percentage. All these things have very small bugs in them. And so we have to go through a rigorous washing and checking of these vegetables. Vegetables inherently are kosher, okay? It's the problem is that there's a high level of infestation on them. So you got to do a rigorous washing and then checking to make sure that there's no bugs in there. Okay, because we're not allowed to eat a bug. It mentions in the Torah 5 times about not eating a creepy crawler. Okay, and if it's a flying creepy crawler, 6 times. Okay, so there's a lot of negative commandments, let's say, in the Torah, because the Torah is full of positive to-dos, good do's, and then there's avoid, things to avoid. Like a doctor, avoid this, do this, right? Exercise, don't eat, whatever, okay? So in any case, so that's bugs. And we're not allowed to eat bugs or any derivative of bugs.
Okay.
And then, of course, then there's wine, right? Wine, or once a grape, and this came from thousands of years ago as the rabbis made an enactment, because wine is used for our Jewish rituals a lot.
Borei Pri Hagafen.
Borei Pri Hagafen, we use it for, Kiddush on Sabbath Eve. We sanctify the day on Yom Tov, on holidays also we sanctify. Wine is a very special ritual thing that is built into our system. So the rabbis enacted, because it is so special, and all wine looks alike to me, right? So you can confuse a non-Jewish wine that was used for some pagan ritual for a kosher wine. And because this has a level of sanctity to it, the rabbi said, they went like this: from the time that the grape is squeezed until it either reaches a certain boiling point, that means it went down in terms of its quality, or it is, let's say you make wine, sealed with a double seal. If it's touched by a non-Jew, it is disqualified. It's just one of those. So therefore, and that really bleeds into the idea where we see that now is grape flavors. Grape flavors, now they make a synthetic grape flavor or they make a kosher grape flavor. It can be, it's out there. Plenty of kosher grape flavor, but not all grape flavors are kosher, okay? When you think it's just a fruit, Rabbi, one of those things. So anyways, we have a spectrum of foods from meat to milk to fish to bug to grape, right? And then you have any derivatives of those also. So that's ingredients, that's raw materials. We have to make sure, let's say if we're going to go to a plant that's going to make some gummies, we have to make sure that, the pectin is used, or agar, or they use the kosher gelatin. And there's a lot of places working on that. And then all the other ingredients as well that goes into the gummy, and including even actually the oil that's made for CBD or cannabis oil. A lot of places make cannabis oil. Yeah, CO2 is usually not an issue, but if they make it with an ethanol, now ethanol, I always thought, that's corn, right? Well, there can be ethanols made from grapes or whey, which is a dairy, okay, which makes a difference if it's a dairy product, because then you have to watch out you're not eating it with meat. But a grape, if it's a grape ethanol, so then you can have an issue with it. So even in terms of, let's say, making a cannabis oil, the usually what we'll do is we have to check into the ethanol that they use, if they use it, to make sure that it's kosher. Once again, we look at the raw materials, and then that's part one. And part two, basically, for this industry is to make sure that the equipment remains or keeps its kosher status. That means that it's not shared with a non-kosher substance on a different run. The biggest example is coconut oil. Coconut oil, it's a vegetable, Rabbi. Coconut. What could be wrong with coconut oil? The issue is a lot of oils are made in the same equipment, in the same manufacturer as they make a beef oil, a non-kosher beef oil. So if on Monday you run a non-kosher beef oil, and then on Tuesday you're going to run your coconut oil, the equipment has been contaminated with the non-kosher beef oil. So it results in a cross-contamination. And that coconut oil, which should be okay, is not okay. So when we go into a place and we look at a facility, we will check on the equipment. Was it used, or was it new? Most places it's new equipment. We don't have an issue if it's new. If we look at the past records of what they were using in that equipment. And then and that's how we ascertain if a company is viable to be kosher certified. That's basically what it takes. We go, we inspect the places, and then then we send inspectors every so often to check in. They have to do spot inspection. It can't be an announced inspection. It has to be unannounced. Like, oh, the rabbi's here. Why? Why, Jimmy? I bet you can answer.
Because it's inspection time.
And if you knew the rabbi was coming, you'll hide the bacon.
Right. Or the lobster, in my case. Okay?
I'm sorry.
Or the lobster. You'll hide the lobster. Okay? So you can't do that, right?
I get
so
you.
that's why the rabbi's here, and he's got to check and he goes through the ingredients. So he inspects a few times a year. We go out. We send people all over to all of the places that we give kosher certification to. They go and they inspect. And usually, most of these places are basically, what can you say? They don't change their ingredients. So usually there's nothing very serious. We don't get many serious problems.
Gotcha. So I've got to ask, you've mentioned cannabis a few times, and obviously we're pro-cannabis media, so there's a reason for us to be chatting about this. Kosher in particular is a niche industry. I mean, you can't go into most markets. You have to go to a kosher market to get kosher food, and you really have to be dedicated and disciplined to adhere to a kosher diet. Now you take that to the cannabis side of things. Now you're in a niche inside a niche. How are you doing this?
Okay, first, you have to understand, the kosher market is not just for Jewish people who observe the Jewish dietary laws.
Right. Oh, I understand. You want
Muslims who eat halal will eat it.
100%. Yep.
Vegans, vegetarians, health conscientious people interested in a safe, healthy product. If you go to 60% of the items that are in your local grocery store are already kosher certified. Anybody usually picks up when they see a kosher symbol next to a non-kosher symbol on a similar item, they will go for that because third-party audit, another pair of eyes looked at it, and it's worth it. That's really, so it's not just for Jewish people. Okay. It's those things that increases the market value. I think the estimated is about 15% a year in terms of sales, because it's not just Jews, it's a broader range and opening up to a broader market. But what was your second question that you asked?
Cannabis.
The niche in the ditch.
Cannabis. Uh-oh. Did we lose you? We just froze. The rabbi just froze on us, ladies and gentlemen. I don't know if it was the magic word of cannabis or not, but we have a frozen rabbi with us.
Okay.
There you are. There you are. You're back. Oh, and you're moving. We have a moving rabbi, non-frozen now.
Yeah, and he's always moving because the issue is.
Okay, backlighting is not good. That's much better. Thank you very much. Perfect.
The issue is my internet is stationed in a place where sometimes my office goes in and out.
I certainly understand that. And even though you are a rabbi, you still have to deal with technology, right?
Oh man, tell me about it. I'm so low rated on that.
So
okay.
Back to cannabis. How in the world did you get into the cannabis world?
Okay, so the story is because I had a son who was diagnosed with brain cancer 7 years ago.
Yep.
And we went through the entire protocol, all of he had surgery, he had radiation, he had chemo, he went through everything, and he had a relapse. And we were trying to rehabilitate him. And, of course, we knew about cannabis because it helps also to reignite the appetite, because he didn't have an appetite for food. Mm-hmm. He didn't eat. So we're trying to reignite that. My wife still also had a hunch that what the doctors were not on, which means she suspected them of making a mistake because it was a relapse. And then we heard about going to California. We heard about cannabis. It was very promising for us because basically they did not have anything to offer us. So we flew to California. We got him a prescription doctor there. And then we found a farm because this doctor was prescribing, because we didn't want it, the psychoactive part was, we already had some issues with some people sending us stuff from Israel for him. that, and nobody had a protocol.
Right.
I mean, now there's more. At least we didn't have access to a good protocol.
Mm-hmm.
So we landed up in a farm where we were juicing it raw, giving it to him, and we were taking oil, and we were trying on all angles, because it says you got to try all angles. And he was doing great there, but we couldn't stay there. We came back to Texas, and the people agreed to send us via mail the medicine. And of course, it didn't make it. It got discovered at a post office, and they lost their farm. It was a huge deal. He didn't get his medicine, and he declined. We ended up in Columbia Hospital in New York with another experimental medicine, but he declined and passed away.
Very sorry for that. I knew that part of your story.
Because of that and our experience, I was then approached by a lot of people with a lot of ailments, And I was saying, try cannabis. They're coming out with new technology, or what do you call it? New developments, right? All the studies in Israel that are coming out.
Mm-hmm.
And I say, try it, go for it, right? And I would tell them how they could go ahead and access it, because I knew some places in California where they could be accessed. And then, of course, people are going, well, what about it being kosher? Because I'm a rabbi in the world. And my father said, why don't you go around and play these places that it's available for people, make them kosher. So I said, wow, that'd be a great idea. And let me go for it, because it seems to be, it's an open market. Okay. And because, the regular kosher market is pretty saturated, and maybe this might be an open field for me also to expand my business.
Mm-hmm.
And it's also deep in my heart, because I know, and and we're all dealing with the huge stigma that is around this herb. Okay. So, we knew people that their kids were having seizures, 300 a day. And we were saying, take the oil. They wouldn't do it because of the stigma. Mm. And the whole family falls apart. The kid suffered brain damage, and the family falls apart. And there's numerous families that have this happen. And so I went to some places, and talked to some people, met some people, and they said, yeah, we want to be kosher. And then one thing led to another. And then through LinkedIn, somebody gave me the advice, go to LinkedIn, hook up with the CEO of all of these places that are producing, and ask them if they want to go kosher. And a lot of places respond. Okay. Because once again, it is going to expand their market, gives a third-party audit, and makes for a safer, healthy product. People feel better about it.
Mm-hmm. I did some research, and I believe there is a 253 dispensary in Turners Falls, Massachusetts, or something that is kosher. Am I right?
Yes. For
Massachusetts.
They and so the idea here is, from my perspective, it's a medicine. It's medicinally. I don't hold by necessarily the recreational field of people, okay? Because I hold recreationally, it shouldn't be, it has to be, you have to be a very mature adult, okay? I think in 10 years, it's not going to be an issue. But, for example, I think, I talk to people who advise that it should never be taken for any young person until they're 26, 27, because there's a certain part of the brain that is still developing, and it could impede that part of the brain. I don't know if you saw any developments around that.
For me? You talking about me?
Forget about you. I'm just talking about the science that's coming out.
The science is coming out. No, and I support that, but I am I don't like how our youth are using the adult product that is still illegal unless you are over 21, and that would be alcohol. And to me, the alcohol impact on the brain still is far more serious than the impact on the brain of the cannabis leaf, the sativa plant. We're talking about a plant.
Do you have the research on that?
Yes, I do, actually.
I'd like to see that.
I actually have it. You know what I'm going to do? I actually have that in my computer right now. And after this talk, I'm going to share it with you.
I'd like to see that. Okay. And my rabbi in Israel said the same thing that you do.
I know him.
Yes, you do know him. Okay. But listen, my business is I want to make it that people who need it for any ailment, whether it's arthritis, whether it's sleeping, whether it's lupus, whether it's whatever,
Right.
that kosher cannabis is available to them wherever they would go. So if they're in Massachusetts and they need it for their arthritis, okay, because they didn't want to bring it over a plane, God forbid, whatever, and they need to access it, they can access kosher medicine easily. Okay. So as far as on the books for you and me, I'm only giving a kosher for it medicinal.
Right. I get. Now, is that something that I was reading as a rabbi, you can't have any kind of a access if it's adult use recreational. Is that have something to do with the religion, or is it just a personal choice of yours?
No, it's actually, there was Rabbi Moshe Feinstein came out with a decision in law that he was confronted, that if his students in his rabbinical school can smoke it. Okay. So he said emphatically, no. Okay. And unreasonably so for many reasons. At the time, they're rabbinical students. They're aspiring to be rabbis. If you engage in activity, I don't know how far you're going to get. Okay. I do see, and you can probably agree with me, a lot of kids who engage in this, a lot, I mean, I can't say all, but there are those who don't get anywhere in life. Okay. I see them. They're still at the car wash. Okay. The guy's 29 years old and still at the car wash. Some there. Okay. But that's for a different discussion. I'm not going to get into that right now. So the idea of what I do is I do in the edible market.
Gotcha.
And my intention and their intention, and I make them, the manufacturer, know that I'm doing this to make it available for people who need it for a medicine.
Medicinal.
Now, with it, that they're going to put it out into the recreational market, it's not my business. Okay. We actually, in the Torah, we don't even have a word for recreation actually in the Bible. Okay. I don't see Abraham going playing golf. I didn't see it. Was there a verse? And Isaac went bungee jumping. I didn't see the verse. Okay. I mean, that's what they were doing at the sacrifice. He was going, guess what? You're bungee jumping. Okay. So in any case,
is that what he told Isaac? Is that what he told Isaac when he brought him up to the mountain?
Is, Isaac was going, we got the bungee cord. Where's the bridge? Okay. So the bridge is behind you, actually. Right. So in any case,
oh gosh, you freeze again on me with that internet. What is it about Houston, Texas? Can we find decent internet in Houston, Texas somewhere? Because I'm so intrigued with talking to the rabbi, but this is the second time now that we've gone into the frozen thing. And I'm really good at filling time. Anybody who knows me well knows that I can fill time. And that's what I'm trying to do. I'm glad you're back. I think we were going to the mountaintop with Isaac before we lost you, but now we're back.
No, right. Really, technically, the Jewish people are very they're engaged in purposeful living. Every action has to be for a purpose. Okay? Now, you can argue that, and I do argue, and I do think that, and we do also have the idea of recreation. I would like to even call it recreation. Okay.
Ooh, I like that.
Creating yourself.
Right.
Okay.
The Rastafarians might like that too. The Rastafarians, as you know, this is the plant that it's ingrained in the human body. Go ahead.
Well, there's a lot of the studies are amazing how it is involved in the homeostasis of every cell in your body. Now, the medicinal parts, that's what we need to get into. And now I'm going to tell you a great story. Are you ready for this?
I can tell that you know how to tell a great story. Go ahead.
Ready for this?
Yes, I'm ready.
A person a person might wonder, why, of all of the entire earth, why do the herbs have the monopoly, so to speak, on healing? Why? Why? Why not fruits? Why not wood? Why not minerals? Why? How did the herbs get their monopoly on healing? I'm going to tell you where it comes from. This is going to blow your mind. Okay, you're ready for this?
I am.
Okay. It started in Genesis, the very third day of creation. God tells, as he says, okay, we're going to have dry land and we're going to have the oceans. We have dry land. He says, I want there to be trees and grasses, right? Let there be trees bearing fruit and then the grasses, right? I want there to be trees and grasses. And he tells the trees, it's in the verses. I could read it for you, but we'll get to it later just for simplicity. He tells the trees, now trees, no mixing. You cannot intermarry.
No
Now,
cross-pollination.
The peach tree cannot do the tango with the avocado tree tonight, okay? Under the moonlight, there's no dancing. I only will engage with the peach tree, and the avocado stays with the avocado, and everything else. Trees, separate. The grasses, he did not tell. The herbs, he did not tell. So the herbs are scratching their head going, what are we going to do? What do we do, right? He tells the trees, separate. He didn't tell us nothing. Can we mix? Can we not mix? So the trees made this kind of a priori argument, kind of this syllogism, this logical deduction, that they said, well, if the trees are separate naturally and they're told not to mix, us, that it's our nature to all just cover the ground and mix, we all the more so should be separate. So all the herbs, all the grasses had a unanimous board meeting and a vote that we're all going to separate. Okay? Listen to me, right? So the grasses agreed, we're going to grow separate. We're not going to mix. So God says, you guys are amazing. You thought that up all by yourself. And because of that, I'm going to reward you with the gift of healing. And therefore, from then on, all of the grasses and herbs, that's why they have cornered the market, so to speak, on all of the healing remedies that we have in the earth, because God gave them that as a gift. Okay? It goes on a little bit more that I have to add. If I could embellish just for a few more minutes, something that I say. And I don't know if it's right. I'm sure some of the rabbis got to come and knock me down. Okay? But we have a phrase, and you might be familiar with it. It says like this, that King David said in the book of Psalms, the stone that was cast away by the builders became the cornerstone. Okay? Now, what does that mean? The stone that was cast away by the builders. So it really, in many commentaries, explain that when they were building the Holy Temple in Jerusalem, they were not allowed to cut stones with metal. No iron could touch the stones that were created to make the Holy Temple, okay? Because you cannot take a substance that's used for war to make a house of peace. So all the stones had to be basically, they used something called a worm. Actually, they discovered it now in the Amazon. There's a type of worm that eats stone. They used this type of worm. They had it. In any case, there was one funky stone. There was one funky stone that it didn't fit. It was a misfit, okay? And me too. And they just kind of threw it away. They just kind of chucked it off, and then we'll dump it later, right? But then when they finally built the entire building and they had the entire structure, then there was this one hole that they couldn't fill, and they needed a proper stone to fit it. And then they found that stone. The stone that they threw away, they put it there, and it became the cornerstone, okay? But I use that in terms of, let's say, there's one herb that you and me and the world know got a bad rap. Did it not?
Oh, yeah.
It was singled out that this is a destructive element. And now we are seeing the turnaround, how there's an amazing healing element in this herb, that it heals a lot of people and gives them a lot of relief in a lot of ways, right?
Right.
And now work out the mental relief, that's a discussion you and me could have, because I do have the question of, does it heal the mind? Okay. But let's put aside that for now and just say, now the stone that was cast away, meaning the herb that was cast away by the builders, becomes a corner herb. And it's a very predominant element that we use in healing all over. How does that sound?
So the analogy I'd like to make about the cornerstone is we're going through an incredible part of history, something I've never experienced in my 62 years on this earth.
None of us have.
Correct. And there's all sorts of things going on. And I'm a half full kind of guy when I look at a glass anyway. So my point, there is already a movement of some positivity coming out of not just the COVID-19, but the protests about the horrible treatment of those people who are of color in our midst over the generations. And I'm just wondering, is the peaceful protests that have emerged after the initial violent protests, is that a lesson learned by human behavior? Are we going to have positive elements emerging from this horrific virus and these horrible protests that we've seen over the last 10 days or so?
Did you say horrible protests?
Well, my point is the violence of the protests.
The violence is a problem, and I think
the protests that are peaceful are awesome. I'm big on
peaceful. If you go, let's go stick with the peaceful.
Yeah, I'm good on the peaceful. I'm big on the peaceful.
We're all big on the peaceful. The violent, of course, I think, because you got other issues going on. Because
yes,
there are the forces there. You know, there are forces that seriously do not like the president, and I feel that they're just absolutely going bazonkers to try to get rid of him, and they'll do anything they can, including paying people money to do damage. That's what I think.
Money is the root of all evil. Money is not a good thing.
To put bricks out in the street for people, it's a question. Yeah, what's going on here? Okay. But let's look at it. You have to look at it as the direction of that we're going in. Is that, listen, between you and me, we have that I'm sure you're familiar with what's called the critical mass. Okay? Which means like the 100th monkey, the famous 100th monkey. You remember that scenario where there were monkeys on different islands and they would put the potatoes or whatever, the food, on the beach. The monkeys would come out, eat the potatoes, and spit out the sand, until on one island they started to train the monkeys to wash the potatoes first. And as soon as there were a certain number of monkeys on one island who were trained to wash their potatoes instantaneously without cell phone, okay, all the monkeys on the other islands got the idea to wash the potatoes, okay? So in other words, the connection of species, when there's a higher level of thinking, a higher level of behaving, a higher way to go, so then there's a certain critical mass of people got it, then instantaneously the rest of the species, let's look at it specifically, the human species, gets it, okay? So in other words, say there's now a raised awareness about how to treat people, just basically. Right. I'm telling you, that video, I couldn't stand it for 10 seconds. I was so disturbed, okay? Just how to treat people, okay? So that is going to raise the level of awareness, and the protest is making a statement, and those people who are protesting peacefully, right? Yep. Of course, the idea creates an energy, and that energy, of course, will bleed out into a global elevation of living. Okay, we call that the critical mass effect. Okay,
right. Mm-hmm.
Of course, we know that there's a lot of way. There's more to go. There's a lot
you
more.
Think? Yeah, but we have certainly reached the bottom of the pit in my lifetime as far as the boiling of anger and emotion between people. Even in Massachusetts, where we are right in the middle of it here, they still have a wear your masks in public rule. And you're starting to see confrontations in public between people who are wearing the mask and people who are not wearing the masks.
Okay.
And this
divisiveness. It's a very serious thing that a person also has to look out for. That the forces of divisiveness. Okay. I don't have an answer. I don't. Okay. Especially as far as the masks goes. I have my opinion about the masks. I listened to what was his name, Dr. Buttar, right, who had 100-doctor panel about do the masks have an effect or not, and all the doctors said it doesn't. The virus is going to go right through the mask, right, like a mouse goes through a chain link fence. Okay, not going to do anything. But you still have the populace who want to be on the blue pill. I'm sorry, that's my personal opinion. Now there is a consideration for others. If you're in a closed place, I respect that consideration and would do it if you're in a closed place, and as a respect for other people. In public, I can't see it. Okay, now it's a new religion, and I don't follow those new religions. Okay, I have my own religion. Okay,
that takes up a lot of your time, I might add, too, I'm sure.
Yes, it does. Thank God.
So when people come to you for explanations of what is going on, how do you handle those questions to you as someone, as a rabbi? Like,
one word. It's one word. And the word in Hebrew is called Emunah. Emunah means faith, meaning connection to God. Emunah means connection to the infinite. In other words, behind that you can be experiencing all of the craziness of the world, we have to know there is a creator, and he's very much involved in the world, and he is controlling everything, and he is totally manipulating and orchestrating everything for us to develop, to become the more whole, enlightened human being. And sometimes it takes a push from the backside. Okay, sometimes it takes a shove from over here, and to awaken us to move forward in terms of our personal development. We always say, God runs the world. I don't care who you're talking about. You want to say Bill Gates, he's going to roll out with the vaccine, and he's going to, vaccinate everybody in the entire world, and you could go crazy, but we sit back and we go, God is orchestrating everything to perfection. God runs the world. And if we know that everything God does is for the best, then we are at a higher level of serenity, at peace with ourselves. When we're at peace with ourselves, then we make correct decisions, right? And not rash decisions.
Right.
And we, inflate situations. We deflate because God is all there is. The bottom line that we all are going to get to is called God is all there is. Okay? And I know that you're in tune with this as well. Okay? Because, people who might have taken the herb recreationally, or mostly, definitely, people who have taken it medicinally, if they can and be aware of their thoughts, right? What are you supposed to be thinking about? If you need to take it medicinally, it's going to affect your psyche, no? Psychoactive effect? Hello? Okay? So the idea here is, I'm just going to move because my wife is talking on the phone.
That's okay.
On the internet. No, it's okay.
I love the moving rabbi camera. This is awesome.
You don't get too dizzy. Okay? So now I forgot where I was talking.
Well, we're talking about God, which is great because
it's all God. It's all about God. We have a phrase. Whenever you're caught in a bind, you have to say the magic words, which is in Hebrew means Ein Od Milvado, which means there's nothing else other than God. meaning all of the atoms and all the subatomic particles. And we all know that if you go into subatomic physics and everything like that, we really don't exist. Okay? We are specks of consciousness in an infinite ocean. Okay? That we're going in and might happen to be an expression of Yaakov Cohen, right? You're Jimmy Young. Is an expression of consciousness that is moving through an ocean of infinite light, okay? And there's different expressions and there's infinite expressions. Of course there's infinite expressions because God is infinite, right? So everything's about one thing and one thing only, connection to God. And anything, and if it helps you get connected, and if you're tested, now the most people are tested now, right? Because there's mayhem outside. There's people masks versus non-masks. Right? So God, we know in the end of days, hate to get into some messianic stuff, okay? Mashiach, we say in Hebrew. At the end of days, he's going to push the line in terms of those who are willing to believe and to hold on to the belief that God is all there is. And he's like a coach, you know, he's got to make, you got to do those reps, you got to do the city, you got to do the workout. He's got to push it. And the imagery is as if, like, say, everybody's hanging on a rope, right? And he's going to shake that rope. Are you going to hang on? Are you not going to hang on? Are you going to let go? Okay? So the idea here is we're challenged. And the way that I've been training myself is to appreciate the opportunity, to appreciate the challenge, saying, thank you, God, for this challenge, that I get to now connect with you on a higher level. Okay? Does it make sense?
To me, it totally makes sense. It's how I live my life.
I'm not saying it's not a challenge. It's definitely a challenge. But listen, going to the gym has to be a challenge. You can't go expect to lift a 5-pound weight for 50 years. It's not a challenge. You got to lift heavy, and the weights are getting heavier. Okay? The weights are very heavy. The world is shocked. Okay, God can you want to say how this coronavirus leaked out of Wuhan and all the espionage that's behind it or whatever. God allowed it to happen, and He allowed everybody to get injected with fear. Okay, He allowed everybody to get overcome with this situation. He wanted it to happen. We say God runs the world, no matter what.
So we will evolve. We will all be better once we survive this and get through this as a human species.
And the best thing is this one tool, and it's called, it's a 5-strand rope called Emunah, which is connection to the Almighty. Okay, connection to the infinite. There is an infinite source who created us. People call him God. Okay, you might call him Almighty. You might call him, I'm Kabbalistic because I study Kabbalah and teach Kabbalah, Ein Sof. Ein Sof is the highest concept you can get to, which means no end, meaning unlimited. We come from an unlimited source, okay? We are connected to an unlimited source, and we have to climb, and we have to reach, and we have to persevere and hang on. And the 5-strand rope is to believe that God, basically it's 5 strands because there's 5 thoughts that go into it, okay? One is, God is orchestrating every single detail in your life, even the smallest detail. We're taught, you're going to like this one, we're taught by our wise men that there is no blade of grass that does not have an angel standing over it, telling it to grow. Okay? Every blade of grass. Okay? So for sure us. We have coaches in the spiritual realm. God, he's like, come on, man, you got to grow. You got to grow, right? And the idea is to know that God is totally involved in every detail of our lives. Everything God does is for the good. There's a purpose for everything, even though we can't see it. We have to know God, there's a reason for everything. And then the other 2 is believe in yourself. That's a big one. That's probably the biggest challenge that humanity has, to believe in themselves. And then the 5th one is believe in humanity. You have to believe that humanity can get it.
And will we all work together to improve? Will this lesson teach us all that our diversity is a strength, not a weakness. Isn't it time for us to embrace the people that don't look like us, that may not have the same religion as us? Isn't it time that we've learned that? Isn't that what this might teach us?
Listen, we say it twice a day. We say the Shema. Shema, you've heard it before. Hear, O Israel, the Lord is our God, the Lord is one.
That one I could have done. I could have done that one. Go ahead.
You probably could have done it in Hebrew, too.
Yes, Shema Yisrael. I got it. I don't know. I got it, pal. I should be standing up, though, shouldn't I? Sorry.
Right after this, we say the Shema. We say, Ve'ahavta et Hashem Elokech, which means you shall love Hashem, your God. Okay? Love. Focus on the love. Okay? And then when we love, and God created the world with all kinds of entities. And he created them, and he gives them their existence. He's giving us our existence. And everything exists for a special purpose. So therefore, if this is God's expression, who are you to not love God's expression? Who are you not to love this kind of person or that? We're all part of God's expression. Okay? So what's not to love? Okay? We have to train ourselves because we've been influenced by who knows what, if not past lives, right? And teachers and environment, right? To hate, to dislike, to make accept, to divide. That's not the Jewish way. No. The Jewish way is all is one, and there's only and our directive is to love.
I am a lover, not a warrior, and I've embraced that my whole life. I want you to know, Rabbi.
But we do have the concept of evil, and we do need to eradicate evil. Okay, there is such a concept, and there is lovers of God hate evil, and if there is something evil, like if somebody's trying to make to divide, to be divisive,
right?
That's called evil. That's the serpent. The serpent in the Garden of Eden, he had a forked tongue because he wanted to do this and separate between Adam and Eve and separate between God and Adam. He was working to make a wedge, and you got to know when to call that out. You don't have to call it out with violence.
No.
You just call it spade a spade.
And you know who I've been quoting a lot. It's a 4-letter word. He's the brother of George Floyd, Terrence Floyd, and he used that 4-letter word. And that 4-letter word is vote. And it allows us to go and express ourselves behind the curtain and vote with our conscience and with what we believe is right.
And look at, and you have to go into the intuition, and you have to use the intuition, okay? Because there's a lot of voices we're being bombarded more than ever before. We are tested, like I said, that rope that Hashem is shaking more than ever before because we're bombarded with media. We can't even think for ourselves. That's why I also advocate meditation, which is because you got to learn how to just get your thoughts together and what feels right, and be aware of your feelings and be aware of your intuition.
And it's a great way to shut your brain off and just look inward. That's what I do with my meditation, and it works.
Yes. Absolutely.
Rabbi, I really think that I could talk with you for hours. You would get nothing done at your work, but I would certainly be enlightened by that. And I just want to say thank you so much for sharing some time with me and our audience here. I think we will all be better for it. And I just think it's amazing that it took Kosher Cannabis to bring the two of us together.
Yeah, thank God. I'm on a mission. I'm on a holy mission from God to make this available, to try to remove the stigma in the world, that people will try this amazing herb that brings a lot of health to a lot of people.
It does. Well, Rabbi Yaakov Cohen, if people want to get in touch with you, wholekosher.com, is that where they go?
Kosher.com, yes, and my direct email, rabbicohen@wholekosher.com. Rabbi
There you
Cohen.
go.
And you're available for bar mitzvahs, parties, weddings, the whole 9 yards.
No bar mitzvahs. I don't do bar mitzvahs.
All right, Rabbi Yaakov Cohen.
Lectures. I do give lectures all over in Kabbalah, mysticism, Hasidic thought, meditation. And of course, I do also, I go to all over the world, actually, to give certification for cannabis products. All up and down, THC, medicinally, CBD, all over.
Fantastic. Well, you're certainly doing God's work, and that has a lot. You have a lot of respect. I have a lot of respect for people who do that. That's all about. He is Rabbi Yaakov Cohen. I am Jimmy Young, the founder of Pro Cannabis Media and the host of In the Weeds. Thank you so much for watching and listening. And remember, it's a whole new world of weed out there. Use it responsibly. We Talk Now, We Talk News, and In the Weeds are all available on most major podcast distributors like iTunes, Spotify, Google Play, and our friends at clnsmedia.com and our flagship, Cannabis.net. So subscribe, share, and like our videos on all the social media networks out there, including LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, the WeedTube, and YouTube. Weed Talk and In the Weeds are two productions of Pro Cannabis Media supported by Revolutionary Clinics, one of the top medical cannabis dispensaries in the Massachusetts area, now with 3 locations in Greater Boston, 2 in Cambridge and 1 on Broadway in Somerville. Rev Clinics has a patient-first mission. They will customize your needs as a medical patient with the proper titration and combination of strains, flavors, and products. Rev Clinics, where the patient comes first.
We are Pro Cannabis Media. We are Pro Cannabis Media.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to another special edition of Weed Talk Now. I'm the founder of Pro Cannabis Media, Jimmy Young.
And I'm the founder of Cannabis.net, Kirk Dalton.
And we are so lucky to have alongside with us, all the way from South Dakota, Melissa Mentiel. Did I do the last name right this time when I was under pressure?
Nope, it's Metley. It's okay though. It's better than mental. People get at that one too. So I appreciate not going in that direction.
And you said you have a lot of relatives, like 300, and everybody has a different pronunciation of the last name, right?
We do. I married into a family that doesn't know how to pronounce their last name, so they all wing it.
There you go.
Always err on the side of caution with a mentally, just go safe.
Just go safe. Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
But didn't I write it down as Mentley? I did. There it is. It's just, looking at your notes and doing a million things at once just never happens. Okay, let's just keep it going because I don't want to redo the open. Let's just jump right into it. Melissa, what is the current situation with marijuana laws in South Dakota?
Ooh, that's a good question. South Dakota currently has the harshest marijuana laws in the United States. We do have a felony by possession charge, which is felony ingestion. So say I got off a plane today from Colorado and for some reason had a law enforcement interaction and had to give them a urine sample. That would be a felony for consuming cannabis in this state. Our laws are set up to fail immediately because we don't have small possession laws. We have basically, you can have 7 pounds and under, and it's the same charge. Ooh. So yeah, it's tough. So South Dakota is in a dire need of some reform. We do need patient access, and we do need straight across the board open access to and for adult use. And so, yeah, we're number one for bad laws in our state on this one.
And what you explained to us earlier was the fact that you're in charge of the medical side of the question. There's two questions on the ballot. One is a medical cannabis policy amendment to the Constitution, the state Constitution, and the other is a adult use recreational. At this time, with 5-6 months to go, 4 months, I don't know, I lost track of the time during this whole COVID thing. How confident are you? What are your poll numbers looking at? And do you have any more money to spend on the campaign?
Well, good questions. So we have two issues on the ballot. We have the Constitutional Amendment A, which is adult use, which also has a section in it to ensure that hemp is allowed to be grown in the state of South Dakota. Our governor for the last 2 years has basically kind of set our farmers aside on the hemp issue. So we passed it this year, but still do not have any crops in our fields. And then Amendment A also does have protections for the medical statutory issue, which will absorb the statutory once they both pass. We are the first state ever to have both issues on the ballot at the same time, which I think is really exciting. And I think it's great because our state has been known to decimate voter initiatives. 2 years ago, they took apart I Am 22, which was our anti-corruption bill. And so that was a concern when we did ironic, huh? Anti-corruption. Let's just dismantle that. But so for the statutory, having Amendment A pass alongside it does give us those constitutional protections, and it does protect our patient program from being absorbed further down the line, such as happened in other states. And so it does keep them in two separate paths, and it does create two really strong programs for the state.
Hey, Melissa, how does this play in with Native Americans and tribal associations? What's South Dakota's stance, and what are tribes trying to do as far as cannabis within the state and getting permits? Are you working with them, or is this kind of a separate avenue to get legalization, or what are they up to?
Okay, so tribes are managed under federal law. So this year we have tribal partners that have put hemp in because their programs were approved by the USDA. And so we do have tribal hemp. We have 3 tribes in the state that have passed resolutions throughout their reservation to legalize cannabis, whether for medicinal use or for adult use. We do partner pretty heavily with the tribes in the state. We have great allies in them, and we support what they do and they support what we do. I always say that we take them off the island because currently with tribal laws, they are only within the reservations. Once our state law passes, they're able to transport and move their product, into our state shelves and also reservation to reservation. So we've had great relationships with the tribe ever since Flandreau had their grow facility here back in, it would have been 2016.
So are there tribes within the reservation growing and selling at a retail level?
Not yet. They're just starting to get up and running with that. I think everybody's pretty cautious after what happened with Flandreau. And so they're taking it slow but steady and making sure that they know all of their rights. With the Cole Memorandum and the Wilkinson Memo being taken away by Jeff Sessions, that did change things a lot for tribes and how they felt about their sovereignty and how they were going to take that path forward.
Part of my question had to do with how much money was spent, and I was looking at some notes, and it looks like you guys spent $1 million just to get the signatures and to get it onto the ballot. Like everything in America, sometimes it does come down to fundraising. Obviously, you're still continuing to raise funds, and I did happen to notice that you have skin in the game, Melissa. Way to go on that one. I think that was awesome.
Yeah, just a little skin in the game.
Well, it's $2,000. I'm going to say it. It's public record, okay? So you gave $2,000 of your own money because you believe so much in this cause, right?
I did. I actually have given $60,000 over the past 5 years. So my husband and we funded the issues prior to gaining partnerships with national partners. We wanted to try and do it grassroots, but we learned a very valuable lesson. $60,000 in the state of South Dakota on a ballot initiative is a penny in an ocean compared to what you need to actually make the ballot.
So you said 5 years and 60,000. What was your passion? I mean, that's a long time we're talking, even looking back on when Colorado went. Was it personal? Was it medicinal? Or kind of what got you in the game? That's serious. 5 years ago. What motivated both of you?
Um, I worked in nursing up until 2012 when I had a patient accident. I was lifting a patient out of a chair and we went to go turn. She had Alzheimer's and got very nervous and threw herself back into the chair, and in the process caught my thumb on her belt loop. And when she did that, she hyperextended my left arm and destroyed my shoulder. So she pulled my bicep out of the attachment, tore my labrum in my shoulder in three spots, tore my hip, and herniated 5 discs in my back. Effectively, she ended my nursing career, is what happened. And I am a chronic pain patient now because of that. But opioids and my body do not mix. They make me vomit. I have allergic reactions to them. So we started looking for an alternative and found a salve that actually worked to take the pain away and gave me some functionality in my hand. For about 2 years, I had a contracture where my hand bent forward almost in half and it faced up my arm and I couldn't use it and I wasn't able to use my arm. And so cannabis changed that for me and it made it very personal. We also have a daughter who has seizures. She grew out of them when she was little, but started working with patient communities and asking around and doing some research and found with epilepsy with children, it was really effective. And so it became personal on 2 levels for me. My daughter had her first set of seizures in 15 years a year ago. And so we really have some serious skin in the game. I like to say we have a whole body in the game. It's something that I really believe in. And my husband was really nervous when I started this. We live in a community of 400 people. I'm not from a small town, so I don't adhere to small town politics or understand that you're supposed to act differently in a small town and apparently can't have political positions. But I just said, this is really important to me and I'm going to do it. And so I drug all 3 of my kids to a rally and he was mad at me for about a year, but here we are 6 years later.
That was my next question. When did he switch over and say, I'm going with you on this? So 3 years later?
No, he's still not switched over. It's been a hard road in our house. He's very conservative. This is terrible to say, but I married a Trump voting Republican and I am a diehard Democrat from a Republican family that believes in, I'm very motivated to help in social issues and social justice is big for me. And working in nursing and seeing so many demographics over the years that I've worked in mental health and Alzheimer's care, it was important. But he just knows better. He just knows that you can either be with me or be in my way, but if you're in my way, I'm probably just going to run you down and do what I want anyway. So he just provides support services, which means we get dinner maybe once a week from him.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm hoping he has equal time when it comes to taking care of your children too. I really do kind of hope that's true. Is that true?
They're 21, 20, and 16. They don't even like us anymore, let alone let us take care of them. I mean,
did it ever come to a point in your house though where you wanted to use cannabis for the seizures and he's watching his daughter saying, I don't want to do this? Or was it, I see the results, let's do it?
She was old enough to make a decision without us and told us after the fact is how that worked. And
probably the best way to do it in that house.
Yep, it was. And for me, how do I say this without sounding like DSS needs to come knock on my door? I was appalled and absolutely elated because yes, I was like, you did such a good thing for yourself. And she's been seizure free now again. I mean, we went 15 years without anything, had 3 within a 2-day period. She did what she had to do and she doesn't live with me anymore. She's engaged to be married and bought her own home. So it's not as though the use of cannabis did anything to detrimentally affect her life. She is an amazing kid.
And I'll tell you, there's nothing more amazing as a parent to have eventually get them to be adult people, adult children, and actually talk to them almost eye to eye, almost face to face. You can only get them to the 18 and then they're pretty much on their own. They have to make those decisions. So it sounds like you did pretty good there, Mom.
I think I did. I always say that. I'm like, wow, I didn't screw anybody up. We haven't paid for therapy. I mean, we're doing good. Everybody's got a job. Everybody graduated high school. I've got one graduating college in December. One, they're amazing kids. And, I've always been really upfront with them. And when I started cannabis advocacy, I had more big conversations with my children than I did with my husband about it. So
Oh.
It can
Yeah.
it can put a lot of strain on a relationship when there is a pro-cannabis and an anti-cannabis, male and female, or male and male, or female and female these days. But point being, that can put a lot of strain on a relationship. Yes?
Yes, and it did, and it still does. But he's learned over the years that I'm really pig-headed, and if I want to do something, I'm going to do it. And when we didn't make the ballot 2 years ago, he's like, well, are you done yet? I'm like, no, we're doing this. Like, I made a promise to a little boy and his family that we would not stop till his dad didn't have to commit a felony. And I'm going to keep that promise.
Do you want to walk us through that story, please?
Yeah. We have a family, the Hendrickson family, who has a son with Dravet syndrome. And we've worked with Elijah now. He started with us when he was 2.5 or 3, right under 3, in a wheelchair, made no eye contact. His dad would say he was just kind of this lump of a child. Started working with him, and back in 2016, sent him to Colorado, started helping their family do what needed to be done. And last year I walked Eli into a meeting with me, made a promise to his dad that year that I would make sure that he didn't have to commit a felony. He's a former police officer, and his wife is a nurse for the VA hospital. And he knew every day what they were doing. And I said, I can't watch this as being a mom who has had a child that has had seizures. My daughter had a cardiac and respiratory arrest with 2 of them. We almost lost her. I've been there. I know how hard it is for parents with children with seizures. And I told them, I said, George, I will not stop until this is legal. I will make sure that you do not have to worry about going to jail and your son, because the concern is when you have a special needs child that if they end up in foster care and a foster parent isn't able to care for them and adjust the monitors and the medications and doesn't know that your child could end up dead. And that was their greatest fear, is that he would be taken away. And so I keep promises. I'm really big on that.
Well, you certainly kept your promise to come on this show, and I appreciate that. Kurt, I know you have another question because you're so good
you
at
have both amendments or ballots are both on. How can people, whether they're in South Dakota or outside, after hearing your story, support you? What is the best thing for them to do online, donation-wise? What can I do right now?
You can go to South Dakotans for Better Marijuana Laws. I'm actually going to look it up because I'm terrible about remembering it, and don't tell my boss that.
Well, I looked it up, but that's correct.
Good. I don't remember if it's a .org or a .com. That's my bad.
Well, if it's a nonprofit, it's probably a .org.
.org. So South Dakotans for Better Marijuana Laws.org or newapproachsouthdakota.org. We have 2 websites. You can make a donation through either one of them. We will have a merchandise store up next week. So if you want a really nice shirt to support both issues, we do have those. We have yard flags. We have hemp hats that are really awesome. So, you get to rock a piece of history is what I tell people. Is South Dakota is the reddest state in the nation. In fact, my Instagram handle is Red State Advocate because of that. Our soil bleeds red. So this is a chance for people to really look at our state for once and buy something that we're going to make some history. We're not going to be last in the nation. We're going to be first in the nation to pass both, hopefully. Crossing my fingers, knocking on wood.
What do your numbers say now about the support you're getting?
Numbers are really good.
Poll. I mean, you must be having a poll. Somebody's taking a poll out in South Dakota, right?
There's been lots of polls done in South Dakota, but for some reason, I did not get. We have our big meetings on Tuesdays, and last Tuesday we only kind of talked about this, and I didn't get poll numbers. But polling is phenomenal for medical. Medical is a slam dunk. However, adult use, we're gonna struggle a little bit, but we're just gonna keep doing the best that we can and being honest and transparent and having hard conversations. In South Dakota, we've done some things differently. Like we went to the South Dakota Chamber and to like the Sioux Falls Chamber and all of the chambers of commerces and approached them with this as a business and a compassionate business. And for the first time, I think ever, the chamber for the state didn't come out in opposition to a medical cannabis bill. They came out as neutral, which was pretty amazing. And that included all 3 health systems for our state.
If on midnight voting night you go 1-1, you win the medical and lose the rec, how do you feel?
Torn and scared. We'll be honest with you. After what they did to I Am 22, we're scared. We're scared that if we don't pass both of them, they will take out home cultivation or remove our caregiver program or change the bill into something it wasn't intended to be. And that's scary for us. Fortunately, we have had the same language legislatively sponsored in its entirety twice. So it has went through legislative session 2 times. But having both of them not passed does create a little bit of nervousness and a little bit of fear. And I know our patient families are very concerned that, you know, most of them would never support adult use. It's not on our radar, but having the ability to know that we have some constitutional protections is really, really important.
How frustrating is it as an American citizen when you know for sure that this is the right thing to do for our humanity, and you still have to educate and sell that to your legislator? People that are supposed to be listening to what the populace wants and still resist change.
It's frustrating. We do gigantic call-in and letter writing campaigns during legislative session. We actually start a few weeks prior to and run it all the way through, and then we do a lobby day. But it's very frustrating to have people look us in the face and say, nope, that's political suicide. Well, I'm sorry, but I don't care if it's political suicide for you. What you're supposed to do is grant and represent us, the wishes that we have. So if your political career stops at being a South Dakota senator or a South Dakota House member, I'm okay with that. Like, I'm not here to take you to Congress. I'm not here to make you governor. I'm here for you to listen to what I'm saying to you because you took a job to represent us. And I feel that if they don't need to go anywhere else politically. I mean, you failed the first test you had, and that was to represent your constituency.
We have a similar situation in Massachusetts, maybe with our government and our governor and recreational. A lot of feet dragging and not listening to what people told him. And he wanted to do wasn't a fan and dragged a lot of feet and slowed everything down for years, really. So we can relate a little bit.
And go ahead, Melissa.
Well, with the medical, after the first year being in peer, so when I started doing legislative policy work, I went to peer. I'd never been there before. I didn't know the House, the Senate. I didn't know who anybody was. I basically went up there and was like, let's just put this to bed. Let's legalize medical marijuana. Let's all go back home, and we're just going to have this happy, hunky-dory, very Pollyanna approach to it. And I got kicked in the teeth and learned some very hard lessons that first year. But what we did do is, if you look at our medical bill, it ended up being 25 pages, 95 sections. I call it drawing pictures and using crayons. So hopefully there's no feet dragging because we didn't leave anything open for them to drag on. We gave them a literal roadmap from the day it passes and step by step, every single thing they need to do, all the way to Jack's Law at the very end of it to implement a program for our school children. We did all the work for them. I don't know if either of you have had the chance to read the medical bill, but it is one of the most comprehensive that the United States has ever seen. It's a big bill, and we wanted to make sure that we covered everything. And I went to the governor, and I went to the Department of Public Safety, and we went to the Department of Health, and we said, we are going to do this. We are going to take it to the ballot. You tell me now what you want before we take it to the voters, because once we're there, you don't get to make changes. So give me your wishes now. And we had good conversations, and we adjusted to things that they thought were important, and we changed those.
One of the themes of the last few months as America's gone through this whole COVID-19 thing is the fact that cannabis might be in a position to benefit, to kind of restore the economy, expand the economy with jobs. Are you sensing any kind of help from the COVID-19 pandemic in your grassroots campaign?
Whew, that's a big question, because right now it's just killing us. They canceled every event that we would normally do, every fair, parade, everything. I don't want to say COVID has been a benefit. I think it has made many of us see, and basically everybody in America see, that we live in a country that is so, a pandemic puts us on economic collapse. We need to have a more sustainable economy that we're doing, whether it be statewide or federal wide, that has jobs, that is sustainable through a pandemic. And one of my biggest things is we've had lots of great conversations about funny money, and how during a pandemic, we've seen so many people that live off credit lose things, lose everything, because they don't have actual resources. They're just kind of robbing Peter to pay Paul. And I think cannabis gives people more of a stable ground, because you can create a business out of it. And it doesn't have to be a big corporation. It could be a small mom and pop business. You can do small scale cultivation for some dispensaries. You can have a small dispensary, but it is something that can support your family. And I think now with COVID, a lot of people are understanding that sustainable jobs and the ability to support your family without slashing a credit card is super important.
I don't know if I told you or Isabel told you how this whole thing came about, but one of our partners in distribution is the podcast out of Washington, D.C. called Vote Pro Podcast. And, when you do a podcast, you get to see where your downloads come from. And they've been in like 36 countries, and 49 states in the United States have downloaded their podcast, except for one. That would be South Dakota. Yes. So we're hoping...
Melissa might be the first tonight.
That's right. Well, it's a Vote Pro podcast. They're great guys, and, they contribute to our weekly news video as well. I hope...
No, we're number one.
We're going to... You know what? I give Melissa a lot of credit. She's trying to change and be part of history. That's one of the reasons why I built this little venture of mine too, is I recognize that we are part of a historic time. And this was way before the pandemic. And now, we're right in the middle of that, or at least we're trying to come out of that. And now we're moving forward and trying to figure out what that, and I hate to use the term, that new normal is going to look like. Kurt and I talk about this a lot on our show whenever we do get together, and none of us really know what's going to happen in November. Okay, we really don't. I mean, I was shocked when it happened 4 years ago. And I guess we all kind of learned our lesson, at least up here in the Northeast. And I know you probably guess which way I lean. I don't know what's going to happen after November. But the fact that you guys are out there pounding the pavement and pushing the envelope and trying to get this movement going, I give you so much props, so many props. I wish I could write you that check to equal at least what you guys put in, but I'll give you a forum. I will give you the forum and let you again tell us how people can get involved to help this cause. Because if South Dakota can turn it around, what's left? Nothing, right? I mean, we can take on the world.
I tell people that all the time. If we can pass this in South Dakota, we can get federal legalization through and federal banking, so we can put our money somewhere. Thank you about the history comment. South Dakota is a hard state, and it's been a journey here. And I think you're right on the money. We don't know what's going to happen in November. My husband and I, I'll say my husband and I, just for credit for him, but I bought a farm a month ago, a little 2-acre farm, because what if the whole world burns down in November? I mean, it could happen.
It's not 1%, it's not 1%. You're right.
Yeah.
Yep, 100%. We don't know what's going to happen.
We don't know.
No, and we are, we talk about new normal, and we're supposed to be on this downward trend of flattening the curve, and then we have the highest numbers and months come out a couple days ago, and then we've got Texas back on stay-at-home orders and California going back on them. We just don't know. And I think that, you know, for South Dakota, our biggest thing, if we have South Dakota listeners, I'm going to say this: fill out your absentee ballot request. That is so important. Make sure you're registered to vote. Fill out the absentee ballot request and vote absentee, because in November we may have murder hornets. We don't know. There, you know, we could have earthquakes that split the United States in half.
The locusts are coming.
Exactly. Then you don't even have to go outside. I will send you the stamp.
We're all smiling about the 10 plagues right now. I just want to say that's really not something I want to deal with right now, on top of everything else. One more South Dakota quick story. And, you know, I was a history major many, many moons ago. And Kurt always has this thing whenever we have cannabis guests on to you know where I'm going with this, Kurt.
Yeah, it doesn't make well for me.
No, it doesn't. Who, if you had a Mount Rushmore of weed, who would you put on the Mount Rushmore of weed? And I'll be admitting this, I did not know that Mount Rushmore was actually in South Dakota. So I admit that, and I have learned that. Now that I've given you a little time to think about that, do you have any, would you like to nominate someone for the Mount Rushmore of weed? At least one person, perhaps. You have a shot at it, by the way, in your state. I want to tell you right now.
I have to say this: I would nominate nobody. Because I think that there's so many people that have gotten into this that did it for reasons that were really close to our hearts. And that goes for all of the friends I've made nationally. Nobody that I work with got into this because they wanted to be recognized or they wanted to be famous for cannabis. People got into this because they wanted to change people's lives. And any person that I know personally that I would say deserves that honor would be offended that I said that, because that's not what they're here for. So I would leave the mountain in its beautiful natural state. And, you know, we take our souls to bed every night, and most of us know what we do and what good we do. So I think that's good enough for a lot of us.
Well, we salute your efforts. We support them. It's been a pleasure having you on this show to talk and enlighten us Northeastern, you know, liberal Democrat snobs, if you will. I'll admit it, okay? And I feel very guilty about it. You know, there might be hope in South Dakota after all, and I really hope that in this particular case, you win out and you go 2-0, not 1-1, 2-0.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Come in November. You know, if we don't have the 10 plagues of the world, you're welcome to come hang out with us on election night and see. I mean, it's being part of history. You could podcast live from our offices.
I might buy Jimmy a ticket for that November night to South Dakota. You better watch it.
Come on.
I will tell you.
That's what you wish for, Melissa.
I will.
I'm not scared.
I will make
I
a
definitely
note.
know you're not. No, you are not scared.
I will
Not
make
at
a
all.
note. I will make a note to check on that for sure. And again, we wish you the best of luck. And of course, you did mention something I'm just going to reiterate again. The most important thing when it comes to an election, especially in this one, is to vote. Perhaps the greatest thing that might happen in November is that we have the largest turnout of voters in my lifetime, because it boggles my mind when I find out that, only, 45% of the whole voting voted. That makes no sense. You talk about what people have sacrificed. People die for that, okay? We want to make sure that those people that are over the age of 18 get out there and cast their ballots one way or another, because that is what this country is all about. So, Melissa, thank you.
One last thing to share with
you
that.
Go, girl. Go ahead.
So, South Dakota, for our absentee ballot applications, we are at 4 times right now what they were in 2016. So we are at over 100,000 people that have requested to vote absentee. We're making history with that right now. Our Secretary of States and our county auditors were blown away. So
good.
Yep. I think voter turnout is going to be big this year. So I'm excited.
Certainly. All right. Well, that'll do it for another edition of Weed Talk Now. I am the founder of Pro Cannabis Media, Jimmy Young.
And I am the founder of Cannabis.net. And thank you, Melissa, for joining us on this episode.
Thank you, guys.
Best of luck in South Dakota. That'll do it. Remember, it's a whole new world of weed out there. Use it responsibly. And see you next time on Weed Talk Now. Weed Talk Now, Weed Talk News, and In the Weeds are all available on most major podcast distributors like iTunes, Spotify, Google Play, and our friends at clnsmedia.com and our flagship, Cannabis.net. So subscribe, share, and like our videos on all the social media networks out there, including LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, the WeedTube, and YouTube. Weed Talk and In the Weeds are two productions of Pro Cannabis Media supported by Revolutionary Clinics, one of the top medical cannabis dispensaries in the Massachusetts area, now with 3 locations in Greater Boston, 2 in Cambridge and 1 on Broadway in Somerville. Rev Clinics has a patient-first mission. They will customize your needs as a medical patient with the proper titration and combination of strains, flavors, and products. Rev Clinics, where the patient comes first.
We are Pro Cannabis Media. We are Pro Cannabis Media.
We're back. Welcome back to Weed Talk Live. I'm Jimmy Young.
And I'm Kurt Dalton.
And we welcome in Chris Liska, who is the Chief Science Officer at Alternative Compassion Services, one of the better dispensaries in the Massachusetts area, down in Bridgewater, Massachusetts. And Chris, thank you so much for coming in tonight.
Thanks for having me.
And tell us a little bit about what you do as a Chief Science Officer at a medical dispensary. And get a little bit closer to that microphone so that we can all hear you, too. There you go. Good job, Kurt. You get an assist on that.
Woo.
Basically, oversee the extraction of cannabis products that are made into concentrates for various products. From distillation, where we create a distillate that's used for topicals and edibles. We also have vape products that are extracted, and we have several different types of extraction that we use depending on what we're making. And that's kind of my wheelhouse, is sort of that side of things.
You are a scientist. I've met more scientists in the cannabis space over the last year and a half since I've thrown myself into this industry than I ever thought before. It's just fascinating to me that you can look at a plant and then dissect the chemicals that are in this plant. It blows my mind because I was never a science guy.
Yeah, it's I think that's one of the things that attracted me to cannabis in general, was that there's so much to it. It's not, a single compound, it's many compounds. And I think that's one thing that, particularly for me, is that when talking to, people like my dad, and now he has a better understanding of it, but people of his generation sometimes think all cannabis is the same. And it's really not, because you have different terpenes, you have different cannabinoids, and there's so many different compounds that you can create so many different combinations of plants.
Absolutely. Kurt.
I want to, just a sentence you said right there, I want to say a sentence and you comment on it. Today's cannabis is 10 times stronger than what we had in the 70s or 80s.
I wouldn't say that's accurate. I'd say that there's a lot of things contributing to that statement. One is storage techniques. How was the cannabis stored before it was tested? How was it tested? What method was it used? Was it HPLC? Was it mass spec? And there's a difference as to the testing methodologies, because if you do an HPLC test, you're actually testing the acidic form of the cannabinoids. Whereas if you're doing a mass spec test, you're going to test it in its decarboxylated form, because it actually it combusts the sample in order to test it.
So, just to clarify that, if anti-pot people say it's 10 times stronger and the THC is just off the charts from what we're used to, you would say, hold up.
Right. Yeah. If you were to look at let's say a sample from like the 70s, and you were able to somehow bring it to today and have it in, a storage methodology that was similar to the way that we would prepare it before we send a sample out, I think you'd find that it would be a little bit less, but not as drastic as what people think. Obviously, you're going to see some increase in cannabinoids when you have indoor growing. You have, people have gone to a greenhouse, and there's a lot of like evolution of the plant, and people being involved with its growing that's changed that. So I'm sure that it's improved the cannabinoid levels to a certain extent, but I wouldn't say that it's that astronomical now.
One of the words that seems to accompany the cannabinoids and the new verbiage about cannabis is terpenes. We hear this a lot. We hear about myrcene and other scenes, and please explain to our audience what a terpene is and how important it is actually in the development and of the concentrates.
So there's terpenes are aromatic hydrocarbons. They're a component of the plant that, in this case, gives it its smell. And they interact with other aspects of the plant, the cannabinoids, the aldehydes, ketones, ethers. There's a lot of other things that are in the plant, not just terpenes, that contribute to what's referred to as the entourage effect. The entourage effect is something that is present when you have one compound that its effectiveness will be increased by the presence of other compounds, and that's what's happening in the case of cannabis. Is that the cannabinoids are more readily able to cross the blood-brain barrier because of the presence of terpenes and ketones, aldehydes, things like that. Which that's why it's a misnomer. A lot of people think that when they look for a cannabis, they're looking for high TAC. They're looking for high cannabinoid all the time. And they're, in a lot of ways, missing out on a lot of really, therapeutic potential strains, because there's so many out there that are high in these different terpenes and different compounds that may not be a 23% THC strain. It may be 14, but it may have, some THCV in it, and it may contain a high amount of, beta caryophyllene or something like that. Or, there's a different...
I'm sorry. I think I was not a science guy.
He's wicked smart, dude. Wicked smart.
He had all these scientists. It's amazing. They use words. Not only don't I know what they mean, but I never heard these words before. And that's kind of, you could make fun of me if you want, because it is what it is. You can do that.
So this is a great point you brought up. A lot of people might not know the entourage effect, and we'll make fun of Jimmy later, is that the world is shifting to CBD from hemp, and so many people say, "I don't want THC." I drug test, I work, no THC. For those that are in the industry, know there's a little debate. Entourage effect, whole plant medicine. You need all those cannabinoids, all the other things in that plant for your arthritis, for your PTSD. It's not about getting high, but we don't understand the plant enough to just say, give me THCV and CBD. So can you explain why? I assume you're a fan of whole plant medicine and what the entourage, is it real, and what does it mean?
Yeah, there's the whole plant encompasses like so much more in the activity of like what the plant can do. If you have let's say you have a really uncommon cannabinoid for some reason present, like THCV in a high amount. That by itself is not really going to be, it may have some like appetite suppressing qualities to it, but it's going to be much more effective when it's in combination with other cannabinoids like THC. The same thing's found to be true with CBD, is that CBD in a lot of recent experiments and studies has shown to be more effective when it's with some THC, very small amount. So, and then the addition of terpenes obviously makes a big difference there as well. The big thing I think with a lot of the CBD products that we're seeing is that they're isolates. Because when they do a hemp extraction for CBD, and they're going to export it from a state to state, they can't have any THC in it.
Right.
So it has to be remediated, and all of the THC has to be removed. So then you get to the point where you only have 99.99% CBD. You've removed all that stuff. There's no terpenes left. There's no there's nothing else at that point. So I'm sure it has some therapeutic value, but not as much as it did when it contained those terpenes, which is why when we do a CBD preparation, I prefer to use, we decarboxylate the plant material, and then we do an extraction where we leave the terpenes in. Which is unusual because usually you destroy the terpenes, but we're able to separate them in the process we do and then put them back in. So it has a more pronounced effect.
And in just a few minutes, we're going to bring in Dr. Jordan Tischler of Inhale MD, and I'll tell you a little anecdotal story about Jordan at that time. But he is one who has warned anybody who would listen, and he has spoken at many conventions about the dangers of vaping. There's been a lot of concern about what goes in this particular concentrate. Again, it really shows why regulation is going to be so important, because most of the medical dispensaries, in fact, I will say all of the medical dispensaries in Massachusetts, have everything that goes out to the public is tested by CDX labs, MCR labs, take your pick of the lab, that's safe. I just want to make sure that people understand that if you are using a concentrate from a medicinal dispensary in Massachusetts, those concentrates are still safe. Now, the question is, what happens when it gets vaped? Now, can you take me through that a little bit?
Yeah, so there's a couple things about vapes. One thing that's critical when you vaporize something is that it doesn't contain lipids and wax. So one of the things that we do with products that are going to be vaporized is it goes through a dewaxing or winterization process where we're able to remove those lipids in that wax, and then it gives it a much cleaner vaporization. You don't have any of the degradation products that are created, and it avoids things like lipoid pneumonia. That's one of the issues that you see with a lot of unregulated carts, street carts, things like that. They're not required to meet any kind of standards, so they're cut with all kinds of different things to change the viscosity of the oil in order to use cheaper carts, in order to get more carts. And a lot of the things that people are using are not really meant to have ever been vaporized, like vitamin E acetate.
Yeah.
I mean, that, for instance, is obviously something that is problematic.
Yeah, and we've seen now 7 dead, 530 lung diseases reported by the various states to the CDC, and it is a concern. And we are going to talk more about that with the doctor once we get him on the phone. We have him on the phone. We do, so we can actually bring him in right now. The good doctor, Dr. Jordan Tischler, joins us. Hello, Jordan. How are you?
I am well. Thank you for having me on.
Well, this is, when it comes to this kind of thing, I go back to when you and I first met in March of 2018, and I sat in one of your breakout sessions at the New England Cannabis Convention, and you warned at that time about vaping. And here we are, where you get to say, I told you so. Right, Jordan? Come on.
I guess I do. I get to say I told you so. It doesn't make me feel very happy about it, but here we are.
Tell us about where are we right now as we look at the vaping, I'll call it a crisis, and what is your concern as a cannabis expert who has his patients, obviously. This is your most important thing, is your relationship with your patients and what you tell them. How do you, I'm sure you've handled a lot of questions about this over the last few weeks.
Yes, absolutely. There's been a lot of press and some warnings from various governmental agencies. And as my patients are generally paying attention to these sorts of things. And so I've gotten many calls and emails with sort of anguished concern. Most of my patients, when we're talking about using this stuff by inhalation, my recommendation has always been to vaporize flower with a quality vaporizer, and so most of my patients are doing that, and therefore they really don't have any exposure to these cartridges. Some of them have been persuaded to use cartridges, and I think now they're rethinking that in light of this. There are many issues here, and There's obviously your other guest was mentioning some of the additives like the vitamin E acetate. That's clearly a problem in the current crisis, as you called it. But I think that, the broader issue here is that the cartridge systems, these oil pens, really were never designed to meet the sort of stringent needs of proper vaporization without the creation of products of combustion. And so even without the crisis that we're seeing now, I've always felt that these things were not really up to par, up to safety, and that it's a technological issue, but yet nobody has stepped in so far to build a better vaporizer pen, and so we're stuck with the technology that we have.
Yeah, that's interesting. But I have to ask this question of a doctor. You would be the doctor. Chris, I think you and I actually talked about this earlier. Chris Liska is the science officer at Alternative Compassion Services down in Bridgewater, Jordan. He is in studio with us along with Kurt Dalton from Cannabis.net. And one of the things that I've been reading up about how the doctors are looking at putting not a gas like oxygen or smoke in your lungs, but actually putting a wet product, a vapor product into your lungs, and the effect that has on your lungs, making it more susceptible to viruses and bacteria. And yet I hear you say it's still okay to vaporize flour, but it's still putting a vapor in your lungs, isn't it?
Well, I mean, vapor is... I guess that's a good question. The reality is that it depends on what that vapor is. It's not simply the issue of its being, a liquid in its semi-gaseous state. We all breathe water vapor, right? That's in the air, right?
Steam.
So it's not simply the issue of its being a liquid. It really depends on what that liquid is. One of your other guests had mentioned something about lipoid pneumonias, and that's a very real risk when we inhale a volatilized oil. That's not burned oil. That's just oil that has become a vapor that we are inhaling. And the problem is that when we get that oil into our lungs really don't know what to do with that, and so you get this kind of inflammatory reaction. Or you can get that inflammatory reaction, and that can be very, very damaging. So I think it's just not as simple as saying you don't want any sort of vapor. It really depends upon what it is. When we look at the studies that look at people who've smoked cannabis for years, decades really, what we've seen is that they don't seem to develop the kinds of problems that we would expect based on tobacco smoking. And I think that those of us who've been watching this don't understand why that's the case, and that makes us very wary. But the data are fairly convincing. And so we like to avoid many of the particulates and nasty chemicals that we find in cannabis smoke, mostly as a way of hedging our bets here so that we don't see, patients develop problems down the line that were unanticipated. But the bottom line is if you're using a vaporizer, a true flower quality vaporizer at the correct temperature, you're avoiding all of those particulates and you're avoiding all of those products of combustion, which again is just a further hedge to say, look, this is a purer substance. We're really inhaling just cannabinoids and terpenoids. And so it's that much less likely that we're going to see problems.
Jordan, this is Kurt from Cannabis.net, and I think you actually, both our scientists, agree on this, and it's kind of dividing the media, the country, including my own household with my wife. Would you say it's not vaping that's the problem, it's what you're vaping, is the first question. I think you both now agree on that. And two is vaping healthier than smoking? Forget what the substance is, tobacco, cannabis, etc. Would you agree with those two sentences?
Well, I certainly agree with the first one. It's definitely what you're vaping. The question of whether vaping is inherently safer than smoking sort of becomes a political question. and one that I'm not sure I want to weigh in on. But I will say that that one thing we can say for sure is we know a lot more about smoking and the long-term effect, and we don't have as great a handle on what the outcomes of vaping may be. So I'd love to say, sure, if we're vaping, it's probably safer than smoking, but I don't think that we have enough evidence or experience with it to really say that definitively. I will say that, again, I think that vaping the flower at the right temperature simply produces far fewer concerning chemicals, and as such is probably the safest of all.
All right, I'm going to pull my best point guard and pass it to the left. You're nodding. The audience couldn't see you. It's what you're vaping as opposed to actual vaporizing, and is vaping better than smoking overall?
Yeah, this is for Chris. Go ahead, Chris.
I would definitely agree with the first one, and I would also agree with Dr. Tischler on the second, in that there just isn't enough data on vaping to be able to make a determination to conclusively say that. I would agree that vaporizing flower is probably more. It's probably healthier than smoking, but you can't really definitively say that without having the data to back up over the time.
Right. Now here's some data. Cartridges sales and concentrate sales in Massachusetts have gone down 25% since mid-August. So obviously people are saying, I'm not going to do this, but I keep saying that at all medical dispensaries, okay, you've got to have confidence in the extraction process, that the people who are handling the flower know what they're doing. All the people that I know that handle the flower know what they're doing. Here's a little curve for everybody, since I have a medical card and I do inhale my cannabis, and I have used vapes, and I'll tell you this, because of the convenience of the pen or the C-cell cartridges, you do tend to do more of it, and as opposed to going through the whole thing about smoking it, because if you're going to smoke, you're probably going to be going outside type of thing. So that's something that I have noticed immediately as soon as I've gotten rid of my vapes, that I'm not doing it as much. And I think it's got to be a good thing, as long as you can still get access to your medicine. Dr. Tischler?
You hit a great point, Jimmy. Dr. Tischler, what could you tell the public when they're saying, how do I know my vape is safe?
Yeah, well, I think that's, again, I think that there are two issues here. One is, in this current crisis, how do we know what additives have been put into the cartridge? And frankly, I think the answer to that is it's pretty hard to know. In Massachusetts, where these things tend to be pretty tightly regulated, I think that we have a greater confidence that nothing too terrible has been put in there. I mean, one of the things that I think is kind of a bit of a head scratcher to me is that now that we're finding out that this vitamin E is at least a potential culprit, I have to ask, who thought that this was a good idea? Right?
Someone who smoked too much weed, actually, I think, Jordan, and was trying to make a quick buck. And it's mostly in the illegal market.
Right, exactly. But the thing is that what I'm really getting at is that people who know the science and know medicine know that vitamin E in particular is a very allergenic substance. Exactly. So if you get a vitamin E moisturizer and you rub it on your skin, there's a fairly significant risk of developing a rash. On the other hand, a rash on your skin is a bummer, but it's not the end of the world. A rash in your lungs, which is essentially what these people are getting, is, potentially fatal. And so I think that, part of the problem here is that you need to get your material, your vape, from a group of people that you have reason to have confidence that they have some idea what they're doing, and that's where regulation through the Cannabis Control Commission comes in. So I think that that's a good step. I would then go further and say even the cartridges that are manufactured in an appropriate way still have the problem of being of overheating and combusting the material, and that is sort of the longer term risk that I advise patients to avoid.
Yeah, I would agree that they're not. It's not a sophisticated device.
Right.
Yeah, they're very inexpensive. One of the other problems I see with cartridges is that a lot of them, they don't have to meet a standard of any kind. So the manufacturing standards can be really low, and then you run the risk of contamination by heavy metals.
Right.
So, I mean, there's another reason to really make sure that, wherever they're coming from, the source, and that they're, using the best product they can. And like I know that all dispensaries are required to do heavy metal testing, but you want to make sure the carts they're using are good carts too.
Good point.
Right.
Good point.
The oil may have no heavy metals in it to start with, but by the time it's been vaporized through a device that is emitting the heavy metals itself, then your exposure is still there. And the flip side of that is, just how much responsibility do we think can reasonably be left on the shoulders of a patient to know all of these things about what's in the cartridge and whether the device is well made and that sort of thing. And I think the answer, when I think about my 60, 80, 90-year-old patients, I think that that's asking an unreasonable amount of savviness on their part, and that the fundamental essence of a patient is that they're only really looking to feel better. And it's not like they want to take this on as a hobby. There are certainly lots of stoners out there that want to get into the details because it's interesting to them, and that's fine. But really, when we think about patients, they simply want to take the medicine, feel better, and go on with their lives. So, then it becomes really incumbent upon, well, frankly, the government is the regulating body here to make sure that they don't need to do all of that homework because, quite frankly, the product only gets to market when it is safe enough.
It's pretty interesting because Forbes ran a piece, I think, this week claiming that this two reasons that you may see marijuana legalization sped up is this health scare, as well as the inability of police to distinguish between hemp and marijuana crossing the country. We covered it at cannabis.net and wrote an editorial or an opinion saying, this is really the U.S. federal government's fault. They saw legalization coming when California went with the Trump election. They didn't get ahead of it. They pointed fingers. Republicans didn't want to go there. Democrats tiptoed. And now we have this. We called it gas station CBD because we kind of tied it in with these hemp bombs you're finding at your gas stations. We have this health mess, which is killing people. How much is to blame is the U.S. federal government for not getting ahead of this and saying the arbitrage between the black market and the legal market is so great and the incentive is so great to drive a pound of weed from California to New York City or create a quick buck money grab by mixing things into your oils. How much blame should we put on the federal government for not stepping up? And will this cause the federal government to speed things up and say, whoa, we have to have testing, we have to have a specific way to protect people?
Well, I think the federal government really needs to step up. There's no question about that.
Do you know what they did today? By the way, I got to interrupt, Jordan. Do you know what they did today? They agreed to spend $3 million on research on whether CBD works for pain relief. Isn't that a little late to the game, considering the Farm Bill was passed in December? Maybe they should have done that before they made the Farm Bill. I'm just saying.
Of course. Well, the problem here is there's science and there's money. And, earlier in the evening, I was hanging out with one of my friends who's a lawyer and a businessman. And, his point was that frankly, capitalism and healthcare are often very much at odds with each other. Yes, now we have CBD on every street corner that may be tainted with all manner of stuff, and people out there saying CBD is good for this, that, and the other thing, when in fact it's really never been proven to be good for much of anything other than, say, treating seizures in children with genetic seizure disorders. So, again, I don't recommend CBD to people, and I certainly don't recommend the stuff that you're getting kind of online or at the Whole Foods or any of that sort of thing, because it is unproven and unregulated, and that's just a disaster waiting to happen. It's the vape cartridge part 2, and it just hasn't hit yet.
Oh, you took the words right out of our article. That's the next one, gas station CBD. Wait till that gets tested and somebody, whatever happens from that is going to not be good.
We need more regulation. Dr. Jordan Tischler, as always, a pleasure to talk with you. And I always feel like when we end our conversation, I feel like I could talk with you for another 30 minutes or 40 minutes because you are a wealth of information, sir. Inhale MD is how you find Dr. Jordan Tischler. And I look forward to seeing you at a conference near you sometime. Okay, Jordan?
That sounds lovely.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Nice chatting with you guys. Take care now.
You bet.
Bye-bye.
So, Chris, I'm going to, before we wrap you up and say goodbye to you, I do want to revisit something we discussed over dinner. I want you to take me through the process of what happens inside that cartridge. I was under the impression that it heated up and it combusted the oil, and that's what you were breathing in vapor. But you're telling me I'm wrong, of course.
Well, by design, it's not supposed to do that. But like Dr. Tischler was saying, that in a lot of cases, these cartridges are not a sophisticated piece of equipment and they overheat. And therein lies the issue with combustion. They're supposed to heat to before combustion just to vaporize whatever's in the cartridge, but that isn't always what happens. It has to be a higher quality cartridge.
Yeah. We've been able to show a couple of videos of your lab that you built. Can we just run that? We're going to go overtime a little bit here. I'd like to run it again, Chris, and just walk us through it. I mean, I know I see a lot of beakers, and I see a lot of liquids, and I see some other stuff. Can you explain what's going on here? There are the cartridges being filled, right?
Cartridges, yeah. Those are, they look like they're distillate cartridges.
The Grateful Bread,
we got
by the
some
way.
Chem Dog in there.
That's right.
Yeah.
And what do we have here? We've extracted the stuff, and now it's goo.
Well, so in some cases, we do a CO2
You're
extraction.
a scientist, aren't you?
And there's CO2 that's left in the oil when it comes out of the extractor. So we put it on a hot plate in order to get some of it to boil off. He's actually carbon scrubbing that right there to remove chlorophyll from it. Wow. That's a warm ethanol extraction that's going to be winterized. Actually, it has been winterized now.
And patients can come into your Bridgewater dispensary and get your products that we're seeing here.
Yes.
Great. What's the address?
It's Elm Street, Bridgewater.
Okay, Elm Street, Bridgewater, for those that want to know that this gentleman gives the thumbs approval, which I would trust in a heartbeat.
That's right.
If you're worried, Bridgewater.
And I will say it's outstanding. It's been reviewed very positively, the ACS stuff that's being grown on site. And the cartridges and the concentrates and the edibles, I understand, are some of the best in the biz. That's
definitely.
what I hear, right?
Yep.
And again, this is not me. These are all reports that you read on Reddit and some of the review sites. So, Chris, you do a great job, and you constantly amaze me with your brain power because it is so far ahead and over me. It's bizarre. So anyway, hey, do me a favor and wish Stephen Werther all the best.
Oh, definitely.
And an old childhood friend of mine is down there at ACS running things, and I appreciate you taking the time to join us.
We are Pro Cannabis Media.